podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone and welcome to Howie the Podcast. It's Gav and you join us today for something a little bit, actually I keep saying it's a little bit different. Everything we do is a little bit different, but this is genuinely a little bit different because one, I'm bringing back somebody to the pod who hasn't been on in a little while, and two, it's about a book. And normally when we get someone to chat about a book, it's not me who does it. It's normally one of the other lads. So I guess it is a little bit different. Today I am joined by the one and only Connor Bromley. Hello mate.
Hello, how we doing?
Yeah, good. We've just been talking for about 15 minutes before we hit record, and Chris keeps saying this. We should just start hitting record and then talking, and then just starting it there, really, because that's generally what happens. We waste so much gold in that period, like 10 minutes with a guest, where we think, oh shit, I wish I'd just kept that for when, when we hit record. But there we go, mate. Everyone can speculate on what we were chatting about. It was nothing too interesting, to be fair. Just about the fact that neither of us watch telly very much.
Yeah, very much. Doesn't Gary Neville and his lot, don't they do that? They like record
Yeah.
for 10 minutes at the start where they're just coming into the room and Roy
Aye.
Keane whinges about the biscuits or something.
Yeah. It's a bit like mundane, but people like mundane, don't they?
Yeah. Well, we
Hence why they
always,
listen to
whenever
us.
when we speak, we always just do the same thing where we reflect on the fact that it's been about 10 years since we started doing all this
I
Roger
know.
rapport as it was at the time. It's been a journey.
It genuinely has been about 10 years, hasn't it? I think.
2017.
Yeah, you pinged us the other day, didn't you, saying it's been like, well, it'd been 9 years then since your first podcast.
Yeah, it was. It was about James Law.
Aye. Oh God, I remember making the artwork for that. I'm gonna have to post it on the socials for people who haven't seen it. It was me. I couldn't. I still can't edit using anything meaningful. It was done on Snapchat with like the edit function, and I put James Vaughan's head on a picture of the Hitman game, and
Yeah.
we were calling him Hitman. I genuinely a little bit hyped for him signing, and he turned out to be utter shit. But there we go.
Did. But
Mm.
that's kind of the theme of the book, really. We start sort of in that period of awfulness under Ellis Short, the relegation, Sam Allardyce leaving, Moyes and all that, and then it obviously comes through to the current day where we go from, I think, the worst run club in football. I think Sunderland probably were. I don't think we can't argue against that. Maybe Bury, probably the only one, but the worst run club to arguably the best run or one of the best run now. It's
Yeah.
pretty remarkable in 10 years.
Yeah. So you do have a book coming out, and we're going to loop round to that in the second part. But you've got a book coming out called Sunderland Are Back. It's available for pre-order right now on the Your Love Supreme website, and people can check that out while we're chatting. I think get over there. You know, you're wearing headphones. You can close Spotify for a second and open a web browser. So head over to the Love Supreme website and have a little look at that and maybe pre-order it. But thought we'd start off with. I get your book goes from League One to the current day, but we'll start off with a bit of the current day because we're in the
Oh, yeah.
midst, aren't we, of the summer transfer window, pre-season's up and running. I mean, how are you feeling about Sunderland at the minute? Are you excited, impatient, optimistic? Like, where are you at?
A bit of both, really. I'm very excited and I've got utmost faith. I am like the ultimate lover of everything Sunderland in terms of how they run the club and how everything's going on. So I have faith that they know what they're doing. But I am feeling a bit tetchy about the lack of business and wanting to see us sign a right winger is basically the thing that I'm desperate for. Because I just would love to have had that sorted for the pre-season tour. And as we record this, we're a day before our first game in America. And I just would love to have seen our right winger come in for then. And then especially with Jocelyn Tarby having his visa rejected, it means we don't have a right winger going out there, which is frustrating. So overall, I'm feeling fine. I think we're going to be totally fine this coming season. I'm buzzing to be in Europe and all the good stuff that comes with that. But I just would like to see us do a little bit in the transfer market. I'd love to see a right winger don the red and white and hold the scarf up.
I mean, the manager's already said, hasn't he? The club wants around 6 or 7 additions. I think he said that after the game last week.
Yeah.
So I'm not panicking. I mean, I'm one of these though. I don't get too up or down when it comes to this stuff. I just think it's a process. We've got a way of working. Last summer was a complete departure from the way we do things. Like last summer, it was like boom, 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 transfer. constant dopamine hits. The fan base getting up a height every 2 minutes about, oh, who's jetting in for a medical, and look who's holding the scarf above their head. But we don't need that this summer. Yes, we need signings. Every club needs signings. Every club needs to strengthen where they can. But it's probably more a case this year. We can revert a type a little bit and say, we can take our time, be very deliberate, be cautious, don't go in two-footed, like I would say Newcastle have. I look at their business and I think that's a club who are panicking a bit because they've lost some good players and are about to lose even more good players probably. And they've then went and spent big fees on players who probably don't warrant such a fee, given the relative inexperience. We don't need to do that. We just sit back, take our time. I'm sure they're working hard. Like, that's the other thing that doesn't really get talked about. How often do you actually hear anybody at the football club coming out and, leaking stories to the press? It just doesn't happen. You look at the bloody... You see the Hull owner this week, where he's put on Twitter, he's basically just said, there's loads of shit out there about who we're meant to be signing. Here's what's actually going on. And then basically told the fans how far along certain deals were. As a neutral, that's quite fun. I would be devastated if our owner went on like that. So I'm quite happy for Florent Gassolfi, Kirill, whoever else it is, Regis Labris in the background, to crack on with their jobs and do what they seem to like doing, which is just waiting until something's just about ready, and then the stories start to come out, and before you know it, they're wearing a Sunderland top.
Yeah, if you remember when we had Stuart Donald coming on this the old podcast, but this podcast, he was talking about Will Grigg, he was talking about all the signs. So it
was like one of them, wasn't it, where we were just like, right, where are we at with this? Where are we at with that? And he would basically tell you. And
yeah,
in hindsight, it wasn't, because look what happened with Will Grigg. He ended up promising the fans because he was obviously in over his head. He ended up promising the fans on Twitter we would definitely sign players, and then he ended up overpaying for somebody to meet that obligation because he'd set such a high standard. You just can't do that, I don't think, this day and age. The ball's on the Hull owner, fair enough, but not for me, that.
But think about what we did last summer, because, we've spoken to people like Keith Downey, right? And last summer, he's well connected. He has said on multiple occasions that he thought we were going to sign 5 or 6 players last summer and sort of improve the spine of the team. We didn't. We signed 14 or whatever it was in the end. And Sunderland were that quiet on it. They didn't let people know what they were going to do, whereas the Hull owner has already come out, the manager as well. We want to do what Sunderland did. We want to transform the team. You're just immediately giving a leg up to all the teams you're trying to buy players from, because you're going, oh, well, we know you need to sign 15 players, so this is the price, and, pay it or not. And whereas last summer, we were really clever because all the noise out the club was that we're just going to keep it calm. We're not going to do anything crazy. Obviously, we did end up doing something crazy, but because they set that expectation so low, that's why we were all so shocked last summer, because we were all under the impression that there wasn't going to be masses of business. Whereas this Hull owner, if Hull are sitting here on the first week of the season in a month's time and they still haven't signed 12 players, the fans are going to be like, well, hang on, you said, you're putting pressure on yourself for almost no reason.
Yeah, so that's why I don't think there's any reason to panic, because this is the first question I would ask anybody who seems to be panicking. If there'll be people listening to this who are a bit panicky, you can ask yourself this. Ask the people your mates, your family, people at work, who you've probably had conversations with about transfers, and they're like, oh, we need to hurry up and sign this, and we need to hurry up and do this. Ask yourself or ask them, do you trust the people at the club? Do you trust them? I wholeheartedly, 100% trust Florent Gassolfi, Regis Labris, Kirill Louis-Dreyfus. They've earned that trust over, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it's been, depending on who it is. They have earned that trust. And if you trust them and you say you trust them, let it play out in front of you. Don't panic. We'll be fine. That's generally my attitude. We went right down to the last day of the transfer window last summer, and we ended up bringing in some proper bargains, like Brobby for 18 million and Hertrauder on a season-long loan, when he's obviously a very good player, capable of playing at high levels. And Bertrand Traore, for a period there, was good value for us and contributed. These deals aren't always available to you in the middle of July. Sometimes you've got to wait till the end of August to get exactly who you want. And sometimes when a team is desperate and a club is desperate to get a deal over the line, they will panic and we are not in a position where we need to panic. We're nowhere near
No.
close.
But look at our team. Like, we've got a team that finished 7th in the Premier League last season. We've only lost Hertrauda from it, and Traore, but he barely played. But we've not really lost any important cogs of that team. They're all still there. You know, we've not sold a
Yeah.
big player. Roofs is still here. Siddiqui, they were the ones everyone was saying we're going to end up losing a Roofs or a Siddiqui or a Brobby or whoever it was. And, you know, we've also fought off Chelsea for Granit Xhaka, which is a massive thing. That was a scary 6 days, but we did it. We beat them to it. He's staying now. So we're in a really good position. I just think, for me, like, I just want to see that right winger in, just because that's the only position of like actual need that we have. The rest of the team we can go into for the first game of the season. I'd be happy with it. Obviously, I love
Mhm.
Ronaldo. I love all my defenders and my midfielders. It's just that right wing spot. We know we need a proper player in there. But that being said, Trey Hume really started warming up to that. I know some people don't rate him as a right winger, but he got better and better as the season went on in that position. So when we're not even like massively desperate, you know, it's not like we don't have a goalkeeper or something. You have to have one. We can still plow on with what we've got. I just would like to have seen that right winger come in a bit earlier, just so that they got pre-season, because it's an important position for us. But no, I'm not in the position to panic. We did so much good stuff last season. Our squad's still very, very strong. It's much more experienced than it was a year ago. So I'm feeling good
Yeah.
overall.
Yeah. I even look at the squad options we've got now, and if we had to start the game against Ipswich with Talby on the right, or Angulo on the right, or Rig on the right, yeah, fine. Yeah, I'd be absolutely fine with that. Like I said, and that'll be the mentality of Regis Labrise. He's always keen to point out he's very happy with the group he's got. He'll work with what he's got. And like if the season started with the players we've got now, no injuries, nobody leaves, that's a strong side to start the season with. And yeah, I mean, we can get into it, like, but the only thing that worries me is the impact of the World Cup and the fact that we've got players coming back late to pre-season. I think there's obviously Wilson Isadore's there now. He joined the group in the US and he started pre-season, which was really good news. I think on Sunday there's 5 or 6, maybe 7 players rejoin the group for training. So then they're only a couple of weeks behind. And then you've got 4, I think it was Alderete, Shaka, who else was there? Can you think? There was 4 players,
But
wasn't there, who got to the later stages? Alderete, Shaka, Talby,
Meunier,
and Munye. Yeah, we go. That's the 4. So them 4 will join the group a little later, and I think it was kind of hinted they'll be available for the Wrens and I cannot get away with saying this.
Lons.
Rons and Lons, Wrens and Lens, whatever the which way you round you want to say it. It just sounds silly. But regardless, they're going to be back for them games. But there is that worry for me, is that everyone's joining at different stages. And the only thing keeping us sane about that is that everyone else pretty much in the Premier League has lost players to the World Cup, has had players go at the latter stages. I mean, bloody hell, look at Arsenal. They've lost Saliba to an injury, and Declan Rice looked dead on his feet, and Saka was clearly injured. Like, there are other clubs with bigger problems than us, but still, it is disruptive. And all you've got to do, I guess, is hope the club have, well, planned for it, which I imagine they have. They're very good at this stuff.
We'd rather have players at the World Cup than not, though, because if you don't have
Oh,
players
yeah.
at the World Cup, the suggestion would probably be that you don't have very good players. And like, there are some clubs, I think Leeds had 1 player at the World Cup, Noah Okafor. So they've obviously had a full complement come back. But you're sort of thinking, well, how have you only got 1 player at the World Cup? Like, how many did we have? 13 or something mad. We had a crazy number at the World
Yeah,
Cup.
if you include Munye, yeah, 13.
It's like crazy. So like, you've got to have players there. I think the fact is as well, the Premier League starts on the 22nd of August. So even if the players are coming back in on the 26th, it's nearly a month they've got to get up to speed. That's 4 games of pre-season as well. So I don't think it's a big issue. Obviously, the 4 that come in a little bit later, but I would also look at them. And Granit Xhaka, there is no way he's not going to be ready to go from the first game of the season. He's a seasoned pro. He's 33. He knows how to keep his body in shape. He'll be working when he's away. So I'm not even massively worried about those ones. Meunier, exactly the same. He's a seasoned pro. He'll be ready to go and he'll want to be ready to go. So I don't
Hmm.
think it's a huge issue for us, the World Cup. And I think players coming back in July, when you don't start the season until pretty much late August, I don't think it's going to have that much of an impact. Unfortunately, some of those important key cogs we've got, Ballard, Hume, Mukiele, Lefay, those players that are really important to us are still there within the group. and ready to go. And they were probably the most impressed. Well, obviously not Ballard, he didn't play, but Lefay looked unbelievable at York. I know it was only York in a pre-season game, but he looked sharp. He looked like he hadn't missed a beat throughout the summer. And sometimes you come back from pre-season. I've seen Sunderland go to Hartlepool and get beaten pre-season. And they're like a National League team. Sometimes in pre-season that can happen when players aren't, sort of there and sharp. But I feel like we look pretty sharp against York. That's why I'm really intrigued to see how this American tour goes, because I think it's a good level of opposition all 3 games. They're good teams. We obviously Leeds and Liverpool, both Premier League. So it'd be good to measure ourselves against them and where they are in terms of their pre-season.
Yeah, I am looking forward to watching the games. And obviously, we're recording this before Liverpool, and this pod will go out probably a few days' time. But yeah, I mean, let's see. If we get beat 6-0, I'll be like, but generally, I'm just keen to watch the team again. That's the main thing. I was down at York, and it was class. It was class just being in the ground, back around Sunderland fans, watching the team on the pitch, playing good football, scoring goals. That's all you want. That's I I'm not massively bothered by results in pre-season, and obviously you look at the teams we're playing. Liverpool have lost quite a few players to the World Cup, so their squad's been depleted slightly, but still a very strong squad there. You mentioned Leeds before, who we've got to play. They've got a virtually full complement, of players. Literally everybody bar one, so they're strong. And then Wrexham, by that point, you think will have played probably 3-4 games by the time they've played us, and won't have been hit by the World Cup, so they'll have a strong squad. And that's the point of this, really. It's like play strong teams, get minutes into your legs, get fit for the season. That's all it is, really. Like, don't care what anybody else thinks about it. For me, pre-season is just about making sure you're ready for the first day of the season. And last year, the year before, we didn't have, results-wise, didn't have good pre-seasons, but then started both seasons unbelievable. And again, trust Regis, trust the coaches. They've done this twice before and done it well. Let's hope it's the same again. Yes, with different challenges because of the World Cup and stuff, but let's just hope it's the same again this time around, and that they know we trust that they know what they're doing.
Well, exactly it. And last pre-season, I remember going to the 2 Spanish home games. I think it was Betis and Vallecano. I think both times they totally played us off the park. I think we were beaten quite comfortably both times. But it makes no difference because that West Ham game, everyone's playing at 100%. And you then see the team and you see how it all works. And we obviously start the season really well. So yeah, you can learn some things from pre-season, i.e. how the structure of the team's going to be. I think you can learn what tactics they want to play with. And I think that's important. But I think ultimately it is basically about getting players ready for competitive football. That means they're not going to go full-blooded at the tackles. It means players like Ballard, who are all about their physicality. It makes no sense for him to be all about the physicality in pre-season, does it? He's obviously not going to put himself in a position to get hurt, and that goes for every other player there. They're there for sharpness and trying to get back in the rhythm. So they're worth watching because we love Sunderland. How much you learn from them, I don't know. I mean, I'll get carried away if they win convincingly. But if they get beat, I'll just be saying it doesn't matter.
That's it. If you see Enzo Lefay overhead kick, then of course you're going to go mental about it. But
Absolutely.
If we see an absolute disaster class, then we'll just write it off and see. That's the good thing about pre-season for me. If you're a glass half full type of person, which I definitely am, you'll see the positive in it regardless. Like if you win, you're buzzing, like I was at York. If you get beat, you just write it off and say, well, it's only pre-season, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's when the real stuff starts that you find it a little bit hard to justify some of the results. But like for me, I don't think there's any negatives to be taken from pre-season other than like bad injuries happening, and touch wood, there's none of that. That's like that's literally it. What bad can possibly come from it? Because even if you get beat, you've still given players a good run out. They're more prepared for the season than they were before kickoff. It helps build up cohesion in the team. It helps, strengthen bonds that are already there when the lads are away together. Like, I don't know if you've seen it. Like the club put a video out of them all on the plane, and you've got like them playing cards together and pranking together, and some of them playing like video games together. And it's about, because they're such a tight group anyways, it's just about like after a little break from each other, bring them back together and everyone getting on the same page. They're all professionals. They know what they're doing. They've all went through pre-season numerous occasions, so they know what's expected of them as a professional to be able to be ready for the season starting. And like, unless you've got a really toxic environment in a toxic football club, it cannot be anything other than massively positive. And obviously the Shaka thing had a risk of unstabling us a little bit, but that's not a problem now. We know we're past it already. He'll be back in training before you know it, and everybody will be focused. So I'm over. I'm just over the moon with everything at the minute. Anyways, we will shoot for a break, Connor, and when we come back, we'll chat all about your book. So join us after these ads, people. See you in a minute. Welcome back to Howie the podcast. And just before the break there, I did mention we were going to chat a little bit about Connor's book, which he's got coming out, his debut book, which is called Sunderland Are Back. And it's available right now to pre-order if you want to get yourself on that list for a copy from the I Love Supreme website. It costs £15. I can't guarantee that it's going to be a bestseller in Waterstones. I don't know, but you might be getting on the train early, Connor. That's the point I want to get home to people. Is this is your chance to grab a piece of history, because I don't think anybody else has wrote this story yet.
No, I don't think so. And basically last season when we started so well, I sort of took a gamble in October, and I think maybe we'd just beaten. It was like roughly the Chelsea game. I think I might be in the start of November, but it was roughly when we beat Chelsea.
End
And
of
I was like, do you
October,
know what?
it was.
Oh, end of October, yeah. And I was like, do you know what? I think we're going to stay up this season. I was pretty confident. I was like, I think it would be really interesting to tell the story of this season. And then as I thought about it more, I was like, actually, there's no way of telling the story of this season without telling the story of like basically the last 10 years. So I ended up coming up with this mammoth idea of a book that documents basically from the end of the Ellis Short era and how that was just a mess and how the football club was basically dying, to then Stuart and Charlie buying it. Obviously, I was quite heavily involved in all the stuff happening back then, so I got a first-hand sort of view of all the issues that were going on, to then Kirill buying the club and how he essentially transformed it into what it is today. And it was really interesting because it challenged when I spoke, because I spoke to a lot of people on and off the record. So I spoke to former managers on and off the record. I spoke to former players on and off the record. People I knew at the football club at the time. They all generally, when I spoke to them, it was all off the record stuff. But to build a picture of how they were able to change things, and it challenged some of my views, i.e., when Kirill came in, I was expecting everything to have went uber professional. They were still getting the bus everywhere. They weren't getting planes places, which I thought would have happened to help us to League One, and
Yeah.
it didn't. Other things about how ruthless they were in terms of the age profiles, and how basically if you were over the age of 30, you only wanted a certain amount of those players. So it was really ruthless when they first came in, because we had a squad. If you actually look at what Sunderland's squad was under Phil Parkinson at the end, most of the squad was old. We had no resale value in it, but it was all older players. So when Kirill bought the club, it was about bringing that age profile down, particularly obviously in his first full season. That's when like Serkin came in, Callum Doyle came in on loan. We obviously brought in Ross Stewart. So we were trying to get that age profile down, but it challenged my views, because I thought when Kirill would have bought the club, my expectation was that everything would have got more professional straight away, but actually it was more slow burn. They never chucked masses of money at it for no reason, which I think a lot of owners do. So it was really, really interesting talking to people and finding out actually what had went on, rather than our perception as fans.
Yeah. Well, it was a mad time. Just every time I reflect on it, I think we will use that period as the yardstick for everything going forward. From having experienced the club in the worst position it's ever been in, and seen what it took to get back to where we were, we simply won't make them mistakes again. We won't allow the club to make them mistakes again. We'll see the warning signs a mile off. It's about the type of people who were at the club at the time, and the type of people we want to represent Sunderland. I know we've always had this sort of potted idea of what you think a Sunderland player should be like, what do you think a Sunderland manager should be like, the type of person you want to work for Sunderland, but like, it wasn't always the case. And I think, I genuinely think this period has been it'll be used forever now. Certainly as long as we're alive, and certainly as long as the people who were old enough to understand what was going on at the time were alive. It'll never be allowed to happen again. Like it's amazing, isn't it? We're sat here today talking about this now, from such a position of strength. Like Sunderland are about to play in the Europa League, and 4 years ago we were a League One football club. That is berserk. That when you think about the Netflix series and the story of Sunderland Till I Die, this should have been the story. Like, it shouldn't have ended where it did. Like, to me, and the best part is the story's not over. We've got so much more room to grow, improve. Like, we might actually see Sunderland win a trophy. That's unbelievable. And none of that could have happened had we not went through what we went through. And I'm a big
Yeah.
believer in that. I think sometimes you've got to, it's such a stupid phrase, this, but you've got to wreck yourself before you check yourself. It's like, it is that type of thing. We were horrific, and now we're in such a position of strength. And I reckon a lot of football clubs look at us and don't understand that. You go, bloody hell, what a great club Sunderland are now. Look what they're doing. None of them can do what we've done because they haven't gone through what we've gone through. And I suppose to a lesser extent, you can maybe look at Coventry because they plunged all the way to League Two, and look at them now. So yeah, maybe they can probably have some claim to being a club who've went through the ringer as much as we have. But like, genuinely, we are a story that will be talked about forever, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because I spoke to George Ellick of Not the Top 20s, we on your
Yeah, yeah.
podcast before, and I was asking him about, because he's covered the EFL on that time. I was like, do you think any club will ever be able to do what we did? I.e., Sunderland were able to go with this pretty risky and quite controversial recruitment model whereby they kind of went, we're going to go super young, we're going to take lots of risks in the transfer market. And would a team be able to do that? And he was like, I don't think it's possible because a club like Sunderland shouldn't be in League One. The only reason why it became possible at Sunderland is basically that Stuart and Charlie asset stripped it. They took away, they got it to ground zero. They got the staff to the minimum level they could. And it meant when somebody did come in and buy it, they could actually build something. It wasn't like when Ellis Short had it and the building was built. It just had holes everywhere and it was just an absolute nightmare. People were paying, they were getting all the money they needed, but it didn't work as a thing. We had it all stripped down to ground zero because of, Stuart and Charlie and what they did with the club. Then Kirill bought it and he could actually invest in it and they could come up with an actual plan to do what they did, which was, as we all know, implement this model where it was about signing young, exciting players, try and buy players for a low price, sell them on for a high price. And without this fall, without Sunderland hitting rock bottom, I don't know if it's possible for another club to even do it in the way that we did. And you mentioned Coventry, but it was like 20 years it took them, they fell out the Premier League in 2001. They never got anywhere near the Premier League for 25 years. Well, I know they lost a couple of playoff rounds and stuff, but it wasn't until the last few years that was possible for them. So theirs was a slow death and a kind of a slower sort of rise up, whereas we were quick death and then very quick, we are alive again and we are better than we've ever been. And I just don't think another club, maybe Leicester, obviously they've fallen out right now into League One. Maybe they could be in that sort of position. But I think it's just really wild how we went from being the worst run club to the best run club in such a short space of time.
Could only be us, though.
Yeah.
That, to me, that could only ever happen to Sunderland. We haven't used it so much recently because everything seems to be going really well. But a phrase we like on this podcast is typical Sunderland. And I like, that should be in some sort of dictionary or phrase book or something, doing a typical Sunderland, because I genuinely think there's only us this could have happened to, where we've gone through what we've gone through to get to where we are. And yeah, it amazes me that we are where we are, if I'm honest. And I genuinely thought for a time there we would never make it back. 4 years in League One. Like, George Elliott was right. Sunderland should never have been in that position, but we were. And you'll remember as well as I can, every summer it was like there was so much optimism, even before we got relegated to League One. If you watch Sunderland Till I Die Back, which to be honest, I've probably watched it twice ever, so I don't really want to go back and watch it. But like, I remember in the very first episode, it's the build up to the Celtic game in pre-season where we got twatted 5-0 or whatever it was. And Catamol's doing an interview, and it's very media trained type of interview, that's kind of like Catamol to a T, really. But he gives this interview and he's like, yeah, we're really positive. We've got a good group of lads. We're he's talking about promotion and wanting to get promoted and all these things. but that wasn't the reality. Yet at the time, I remember feeling like that. Even I look back now and go, where the hell did I get my optimism from? Because that team was shocking that we put together. Like, if anything, it should have been probably in the middle of the league. It shouldn't have been finishing rock bottom. You know, it was strong enough to finish somewhere in the middle. But still, I don't know where I got my optimism for to think we were going to get promoted. And I had that feeling every summer in League One. And if you look back at the teams we had and the players we had, like, I'm not going to slag anybody off who you might have spoken to for the book, but some of those players should have been nowhere near us. And it's a bloody travesty that they were. And God forbid we ever get back there. Like, I don't think we will. I've kind of just said it before there. I don't think we will, because you don't go through everything we went through to get to that point. I mean, on the subject of people you spoke to, like who can people expect to hear from in the book who they might not have heard from in a little while? I'm guessing you spoke to quite a lot of different players and managers and stuff.
Yeah, I think that probably one of the most interesting people I spoke to was Mike Dodds. So I spoke to him for about 2 hours. I actually met him in the Roker Hotel when he was up for a game, and he was really interesting because obviously he is such a big part of almost everything that happened when we were in League One of the Championship, because he was brought in as like head of player development to begin with. So he was a model. He was essentially the model, wasn't he? He was about trying to get younger players and improve them. And then he talked about how his role changed. He got put in that job. He did Cheltenham and can't remember the other game he did. He did
Doncaster, I think.
Doncaster. Yeah.
Yeah.
He lost both them games. He's getting pelters. And obviously, I think he lived in a pretty normal housing estate. Obviously, he's not made of
Yeah,
a
he
ton of money.
literally live around the corner from me. The club must have hired out these 3 houses, and you had him, Onai, and Barcherini all living next door to each other in these 3 houses, right around the corner from where I live. And then eventually, I think Michael Beale lived in one of them. So yeah, bit of a poison chalice.
Yeah, it is. So Dodds, though, he had such an interesting journey, but he covered off so many eras. He worked with Lee Johnson, he worked with Alex Neil, who obviously spoke really high of, Tony Mowbray, who he's now back working with now at Blackburn. He worked with Michael Beale. Michael Beale was really interesting as well within the book, because I think my perception of Michael Beale as a sort of his time here was that basically he was just an idiot. Basically it was never going to, like, I don't know why he got the job, but actually when I've spoken to people connected around that, the feeling sort of is that it was as much the club's fault as his. They put him in a really bad position. You got to remember he had to deal with the Black Cats bar stuff, which obviously wasn't on him, but all of that negativity that went around, nobody really wanted Tony Mowbray to get sacked, so they sack him, and then they bring in Beale, and we're quite connected with Scottish football just because of where we are. People know Rangers fans. He had such a negative reputation there. We remembered everything that happened at QPR as well. And once the negativity from the fan base sort of came out, I don't really understand why they did it, why they went ahead and hired him, but it was stubbornness. And
I felt sorry for him. I felt really sorry for him. I met him once, and I might mention this a few times on here. Pure chance accident meeting. He was in the same pub as us, and he was pretty well oiled. Like he'd clearly been out for a while, but this was at the height of the pressure that he was under. It was the day before we played Middlesbrough, when I think we drew away. Ruston scored.
Yeah, Ruston.
Yeah, and he I just I can't pass this chance up to go and talk to the Sunderland manager. So he was in the pub, went over, said hello, got chatting to him. And by the time I finished talking to him, I felt sorry for him. I was like, this bloke just wants to do well and has been put in a shit position. And I mean, yeah, look, we can all look back at it now and say it was an utter disaster. And I mentioned before, you go through these things to make you stronger down the line, I think. And that's definitely the case, because we were very careful with how we replaced them, because they knew they got it so badly wrong. But I did. I felt sorry for him. Normal bloke. He was, he wasn't with his family. They were living elsewhere because he'd only recently taken the job and they hadn't moved up or what have you. So he's a bit isolated, very under pressure, getting a dog's abuse. And he was doing a crap job. But I think with hindsight, I think it's fair to say, probably shouldn't have got the job, but also was appallingly at times, actually, like just on a human level, I'm talking, and I can say that now all these years later, because we're obviously a lot better off from it. But I think even at the time I was a bit sympathetic towards all of that, and I felt even more sympathetic towards it having met him and just talked to him as a bloke rather than a bloke I see sitting in front of the media or on the touchline? And was that kind of the impression you got when you spoke to people about him, like, or what?
Yeah, the impression was very much that he was just put in a horrific situation, and I think the club, because it was interesting that so I was always under the impression that Mowbray and Speakman had like kind of a strained relationship, and I thought that that was an issue. But from speaking to people, actually, that's not it. It was Speakman was very much in sort of Mowbray's camp, trying to keep him within there, and it was Kirill that wanted to make the change and bring in sort of a model manager. Model manager. I'll do air quotes for those nobody can see actually because it's audio. Um, so yeah, a lot of people just generally sort of said, you know what, he was a really good bloke. He was just, and even what he was in terms of being a pretty decent coach, it was basically just his face didn't fit. The fan base decided they didn't want him, and I think it became clear very quickly that the club made a massive mistake. But one thing that also came out was just talking about that season generally. It is probably the most important season in some respects because our summer business in 2023, if you actually look at it, was absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, yeah.
Almost every signing was a disaster and didn't work. And we put money, him here, still here right now. We brought in Abdullah Bar came in. I think, oh no, he came in the year before, didn't he? But that's summer 2023 business. We got everything wrong, and they were so committed to signing those younger players that by the time Regis came in, they kind of learnt the lesson, learnt what Tony Mowbray had been telling them, which was you can't just buy kids, you need to have a bit of experience in there. And I don't think without that season, I don't think Kirill would have learnt. I don't think he would have learned that lesson if we didn't have as disastrous a season in 23-24.
Who else did you talk to then other than sort of Mike Dodds? Who can people expect to hear from?
Lee Johnson did a good interview with him. And I don't think as far as I'm aware, I don't think he's done any major interviews.
No. We actually tried to get him on the podcast, and this was just around the time he took the job in Belgium, and yeah, we couldn't work it out. But I don't think he has. No, I think you're right. I think he obviously. Do you not think a lot of people don't want to talk about negative experiences? So especially when they're in a job, like
Yeah.
he's still in that job and he's actually just been promoted with that team. He probably doesn't want to talk about Sunderland. Might be something for once he leaves that job down the road, maybe. But yeah, you're probably right.
But yeah, it was a really good interview. And again, setting a lot of the early building blocks in there in terms of style of play. You got to remember, we played really good stuff under him, in terms of
No,
the
at
actual
times it was
football.
great. Yeah, yeah. Attacking
Yeah.
football, yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. And it was interesting talking to him just like about when he came in, did they have like a 5-year plan to get to the Premier League and stuff like that? So it was really interesting getting the recruitment processes. Mike Dodds was the same, talking about how he'd met Kirill to get the job because he didn't want to drop down to League One. He just came out of Birmingham.
On Lee Johnson, did you ask him about his first game? That was a bit mad, wasn't it? He was like
Yeah,
appointed
I
on
did.
the
Yeah.
dinner time and then was on the touchline that
Yeah.
day.
There's a good story in there about, I don't know if I should share that now, but there is a good story about that on the day because yeah, I always sort of thought, has he just done that? Because I think we're playing bottom of the table Wigan, or they were really, really low in the table.
It was when Wigan were about to, I think they were in administration, they were in dire
Yeah.
straits, and they were having to play like kids and free agents and stuff. And obviously we got beat.
Yeah.
Typical us.
There's a good story about that in there though. So yeah, we did talk about that. But yeah, there was loads of good stuff. I spoke to a lot of journalists as well around the club. Keith Downey gave us some really good stuff on last summer. So I
All
sat
right.
with him and we sort of went through the full summer transfer business and how it all kind of played out from his perspective. Because I mean, I think you had him on here, maybe just after the transfer window last year, and it was a
Yeah,
really
yeah.
interesting
Mhm.
interview. So we kind of just sort of using almost that interview, but then expand on a few points. So that was really interesting. And then just people like, Nick Barnes, I spoke to probably 6 hours just talking to him and getting a feel around, because he's always talking to the managers, he's got good relationships with them, just getting a feel around what kind of the feeling was around the club from somebody who's sort of within it, but also is completely on the outside. Obviously,
Mhm.
Nick really, really well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he's always got some pretty good insights. So yeah, and then I've spoken to other people, a few former players. I'll not delve all the names out so people can just buy it and see who else is interviewed in there. But yeah, the one thing I was disappointed at was that the club wouldn't really work with us on it. So I couldn't get anyone that was sort of current, even people that I know. So like, Luke O'Nine, somebody that I know from when I worked there. They were told not to do interviews and stuff for it, which was a little bit disappointing. But I think in a way it probably helps because it just meant I didn't have to get things passed by them, which I
Yeah.
would have.
Yeah, that's
So
true. And you might not have got the truth as well, because if
yeah,
you still work for the club, do you want to badmouth them? Do you want to badmouth people who you might work with again down the line? It's sometimes you would have the same problems as someone from the Echo or Nick would have, trying to get answers out of people. If
yeah,
if Nick went to Luke 09 with a microphone in front of him and the camera saying, "Right, Luke, so what did you think about Jack Ross's record at Sunderland?" Or, do you know what I mean? It would be very difficult for him to be anything other than nice. And sometimes you
yeah.
need an off the record chat, maybe to get the truth to the truth of the matter. But I mean, when it came to the more modern day stuff, what would you say? Was there any big revelations, like when you were speaking to Keith or whoever it was, or doing your research into kind of the book? Like, is there anything that stood out to you, what you didn't know before? And you're like, bloody hell, I didn't have a clue about that, or like that makes sense now because I didn't realize that, but at the time I thought this. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've just talked about Michael Beale there, and while
Yeah.
I was like, I got a different perspective on him having spoke to him. You do get that when you're trying to put stories together, don't you?
I'm trying to think if there's anything particularly. I mean, the weird thing is that obviously I am quite well connected. So I mean, you'll be the same as me, where you'll hear things kind of off the record all the time. You'll hear stuff about which you don't know are true. I remember like we were talking last year about Stuart Harvey, weren't we? Like, oh, we've
Mhm.
heard that maybe he could potentially be leaving, but you're like, you don't know it to be necessarily true or not. So there's things like that where I've kind of had things sort of confirmed to us through doing it. I'm trying to think of any off the top of my head, and I'm struggling. There's quite a few like bits of transfer stuff in there. So like Kiefer Moore, do you know, we were like really linked with Kiefer Moore, I think the January under Michael Beale.
Yes. Well, yeah. Go on. I'll see if my story and your story matches up.
Okay. And basically, they just decided that so I think Beale had it kind of wrapped up. It just needed the sign off to say, and that they decided at the last minute that they just weren't going to pay I think it was on 30 grand a week. Like, no, we're
Yeah.
not going to do that.
Right.
They basically wrote the season off in
Yeah.
January, and they went, "Do you know what? I don't think we're going to get promoted. We're just going to leave it till the end of the season," which is basically what they
Hmm.
did when they brought in Mike Dodds,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I kind of knew that, but I didn't realize in the January that that's not an align. They were misaligned on that because I think the playing side of it thought that they still had a chance. I think the club had almost made the decision. Actually, this isn't going to be the year. What's the point in wasting
Hmm.
probably £1 million on Kiefer Moore when we're not going to get promoted anyway?
Yeah. Well, when I go back to that conversation I had with Michael Beale, he told us that. So at the time, we were trying. I think Keith Moore hadn't quite signed. I think it was Ipswich he went to, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I think, and it hadn't quite got over the line. But he outright said, I mean, he was very open and honest. I don't mind saying this now because it's years down the line, but he was like, we'll only go to 20 and they'll go to 30 and we won't match it. So I want him,
yeah,
desperate to get a striker. And he was like, every day I'm banging on the door saying, what can we do to get this over the line to get a striker in? He was so frustrated about it, really frustrated about it, and said, they won't go 10 grand better off. He actually told us as well that we'd been offered Ahmad back on loan and
yeah.
the money
I
was
think
too
that's in
much.
there as well.
Yeah, yeah. So all these things around that time, you can kind of put the picture together, and I think people might end up, when they read your book, they might end up being a bit more sympathetic towards certain people. Maybe Beale will be one of them, because he did. You ask anybody about Michael Beale at Sunderland, and they'll just say, shite, he should never have been appointed. But there are so many threads to this that, if he'd been backed, if he hadn't been brought in the way he had, if there wasn't the off the pitch crap with the Black Cats bar stuff, and if he had a better first result, because there was so much negativity around that game. Who did we play? We got beat 3-0, I remember. It
Coventry.
was Coventry, wasn't it? Yeah. Had things started a little bit better, look, I wouldn't change any of it because it's led us to this point. Michael Beale had been semi-successful and hadn't been sacked. We might never have got Regis Labris, and then God knows where we'd be. But all I'm saying is like, I guess that's the good thing you can do with a book like this is you can kind of join the dots for people because no Sunderland fan is going to go out and put the time and the research in like you have and sit down with the people who you have to put these pictures together. And sometimes you read books by fans and it's all done off their own, what they think happened, as opposed to
Mm,
doing proper research and talking to people and including quotes from those people to help put the picture together. I think, and that can sometimes, you get a very biased viewpoint on what actually happened, and it might actually be quite a dull book because ultimately all you're doing is reading someone else's thoughts on what you already know. Whereas, I guess with what you've done with this project, it's more of a, this is what I know, but also this is what all these people know. And I think that makes it quite an interesting book, actually, when you think about it, because like I said before, I don't think anybody else has done this.
It challenges as well, like some of your thought process, because I came into it basically thinking Christian Speakman is a unbelievable sporting director, and he is. There's no denying that. But speaking to people that don't have that view, there's a few former players that I spoke to that aren't particularly glowing about Christian Speakman and the way that he sort of behaved at times, and there's things in there. There's also, and I'll not dive into the details, I think it's quite a juicy story, but I just was talking to you about this the other day where, Aidan McGeady getting knocked out the team. If you remember, under Parkinson,
Yeah.
and sort of the story behind that's in there, which I think is really, really interesting to see the clear dressing room issues that were going on within that period. So it's interesting because you end up challenging sometimes your view on what happened. In my head, is watching it as a fan, what happened to actually what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, even the stuff like Will Still, twice being really close to getting him over the line. The first time, not willing to pay the compensation fee. The
What
second
a bullet we
time,
dodged there, by the way.
well, yeah, exactly. And the second time, though, like, going for him, I think it was him and Regis were the two candidates, but Will Still was up in I think he was in the Northeast looking for houses and stuff. So obviously thinking that there was a strong chance that he was going to get the job. So there's just a lot of things in there which were interesting. But interestingly, on that Will Still Regis thing, nobody told me that Will Still was the number one candidate. And I don't know if that's true or false, but I was under the impression that Will Still was the number one. They couldn't get it, so they went with Regis. But when I've spoken to people, it sounds like it's the two of them were really, really neck and neck as to who was going to get the job, and they end up going for Regis. And I think, judging by the fact Will Still ended up at Southampton a year later, I would guess that he probably did want to come to Sunderland.
Yeah. Wanted the team in red and white, didn't he?
Yeah, clearly.
Aye. Well, I guess, Connor, this is your chance, mate. Plug the book away. Where can people buy it again? I've already mentioned the LS, but it's out
Yeah,
for pre-order now. But
yeah.
when is it actually out, and when will people be able to walk into the LS shop and pick it off the shelf?
So I'm hoping it'll be. I don't want to stick any promises on it because we're currently, as I record right now, we've got the final edits to do, in the sense that just literally putting things on the page so that you don't have like hangovers. So you've got like one line on a fresh page. So we
Yeah,
just need to clear all that sort of stuff up. It should be at printers next week. So as I record this, that'll be the 27th. Apologies, my dog's barking in his sleep if you can hear that. Having a good dream. The 27th. So hopefully it'll be definitely in by the Ren preseason game. I'm hoping it'll be in at that point. And I'm doing an event at the Fans Museum for the Europa League draw on the 28th. So if people are going to that event, there's links to that online. I think you shared it yesterday on Roker Report. I'll be there with books as well if people want to sort of show up, and if they want a signed copy, I'll be happy to sign any copies if people
That
have bought it. So
that is a weird experience, by the way. So, we didn't actually do many. Well, actually, we done one in person book sale for when we done the SAFC 365 book, of which I was only a small part of it. I didn't contribute a great amount to that book. But me and Martin from ALS, we went along to the senior supporters meeting at the Stadium of Light, and I was blown away walking into this room. There's like 200 people there. There's stalls everywhere with people selling stuff. And a fella came up, wasn't asked us to sign the book, and I was like, "What? This just feels weird.
yeah,
Something nobody's ever asked us to do before." So there is somebody out there who has a signed copy of that book with my signature in it. And I remember me hand shaking and everything. I'm not normally that type of person, so you'll probably have this conversation in the back of your mind the first time somebody asks you to do that. It's quite a humbling experience because you're like, "Oh shit, yeah, we did something. Yeah, it's pretty cool."
I find it weird as well, where because obviously I'm on YouTube. Often, like when I was at York at the weekend, a lot of people stop us and say hello and stuff, and I find that really, because I don't think of myself as being, even though I'm on YouTube, obviously it's logical people watch Sunderland stuff on YouTube that people would know. I always find that like quite a jarring experience, but interesting on the signing things. Martin, I did a crossword book last year, and Martin put on the website. Martin's the guy who runs ALS. If anyone doesn't know, he put on the website signed by author without asking us. So I was like, I saw it and I was like, Martin, what's going on here? I've never
Bit of
I
added
haven't signed
value
it.
in it.
Yeah, and he was like, oh, people prefer it when they're signed. And I was like, right. So have I got to sign 1,000 books? And he's like, yep. I was like, brilliant. Thanks for
Did you have your
signing us
white
up for that.
folding the pages open for you, like what they do at the academy when they're getting the signed shirts? It's like
Yeah,
chucking them
no,
at them.
just me, just signing away. Best wishes, CV. But yeah, I hope people enjoy it though. I've put like 9 months of time in. It's about 100,000 words, so it's quite long. I think it's going to be about 250 to 300 pages. So
It's a long story, isn't it? Like
yeah, it's a
but
girthy story.
yeah. So there's plenty you could have packed in probably that you didn't as well. I would have thought.
There's some stuff. Yeah, I had a few people read it and they've been like, "Oh, did you put this in? Oh, you haven't put this in." I was like, to be honest, I haven't put it in because it's already very long. Like it's just like sometimes you have to be like quite clear, like if it's relevant to the story or not, and if it's not massively relevant, it's an aside. Sometimes you have to make those decisions. But yeah, I hope people enjoy it. And I'm nervous about like the first people to read it in case there's, I don't know, a minor error in there or something, but it can happen.
Well, let's hope there's not, and people enjoy the book. So, Sunderland Are Back: The Story of Sunderland's Rise from League One to Europe is available to pre-order now through Love Supreme on their website. It costs £15, and as Connor says, it shouldn't be too long before those are being sent out all over the globe. You'll have people might even have people in America, Australia, Canada. You
Yeah,
never
yeah.
know. Yeah,
I
why
had
not?
Argentinian Magnums. They reached out, so there'll definitely one going there.
Yeah, there you
Um,
go.
so Tim Rice, he's ordered one.
Brilliant,
Yeah,
brilliant.
happy with that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you've lived every twist and turn of the last 8 years as a Sunderland supporter, this sounds like it's going to be essential reading. Just need to say thank you very much, mate. Been a pleasure catching up.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah,
I've enjoyed it. Love talking Sun. I feel like this is almost like a return home. It's where it all started for me on this Roker report. So it's nice to be
absolutely.
back.
Absolutely. Thank you to the listeners for joining us. We've got plenty coming up and plenty for you to catch up on How We Are the Podcast. We do drop a show every single day, and we keep threatening this, but when we do sign a player, we will also have reaction pods dropping very soon afterwards. So when we do sign some players, keep an eye out, because we will be here with reactions and things like that. Also head to rotorreport.sbnation.com for all your fan-written daily content, and follow us at Rotor Report on whichever social media platform you prefer, apart from Truth Social, which we aren't on yet. Donald Trump hasn't invited us. I don't know if I'd take his invite either way, but there we go. Thank you, everybody. We will be back tomorrow with another show. We'll see you then.